Hey there, welcome to ATL and 29, a podcast that looks at the NBA from the starting point of Atlanta. My name is Kevin Chenard. I'm here with Glen Willis, Tyler Jones, and it's hard to believe that we're going to see the Hawks on the court in 6 days. We're recording on a Tuesday night. There will be games very, very soon. And, we did a media day, which is like the usual media day things, but like, what do you between now and Monday night, like what do you want to learn about this basketball team? Like, do my job for me. What should I be asking people at these practices? What can we figure out before they get on the court?
That's a good question. Um, Without being able to see anything,
It's such an academic exercise at this point, right?
yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm just hoping they have a healthy camp. I It's
Trey
hard
did
to.
say that today. He pointed at the trainer's table and said, "Look, there's nobody back there." So we do know that much as of right
But
now.
I guess a point in that favor is like it's one of those things where you don't realize it's true until it's said. But like one of the first things Quinn Snyder talked about at media day, and maybe Ansi said this as well, is that the Hawks are one of the youngest teams in the NBA. They're the third youngest team in the NBA, and that's just something you don't realize until you really think about it. Like this is an incredibly young basketball team, so hopefully one of the positives of being young is that you don't have those muscle like injuries that can really stall out a season like the Hawks have had the last couple of years with some of the older vets that are no longer on the team. So that's a positive of being younger. Is you're typically like you don't have those types of injuries in particular.
What should we be looking for this week, Glenn?
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, people that I'm talking to, they're hoping to get some behind the scenes video of a 5-on-5 practice and see who's wearing what color jersey and if that means anything about who's going to start or who's not going to start. There's some of that happening, which is interesting to me. I think it's pretty clear. I do think that people are curious about the center position, who's actually going to start at center. And I don't think anyone kind of gave any hints away at media day. It didn't seem like there was anything revealed or to suggest that it was going to go one way or the other. So that's kind of interesting to me. But for me, this is a different roster. They have more shooting, they have more balance, offense, defense balance, kind of up and down the roster. And I think the thing for me, and maybe this is just kind of how I watch basketball, is just what are they running that's new? Like, what are they running that's different than what they ran last year because they have differently skilled players this year. And so that's to me, that's what I'm kind of most interested in seeing. I think for me, the biggest thing is Jalen. Because last year just didn't have enough creation on the roster. And before Jalen got hurt, he was kind of running the second unit offense. And when he got hurt, it was Dyson. We've talked about that several times. But are they going to be able to kind of optimize his skill set in a different way this year because there's more ball handling, there's more passing, there's more of a veteran experience in the backcourt, and those sorts of things, and what does his usage look like? That's different from next year. So I'm really eager to see what that means for him, and a little bit of the same question for Ricochet as well, because Ricochet is mostly kind of spotting up, catch and shoot, all that sort of stuff. Across the season, he did better at getting to a pull up. As the season went on down the stretch, he did better sprinting to the 3 point line in transition to create an open transition three and doing some stuff like that. And so, but for those two guys, the ones that I feel like I know what Luke Kennard could do. I feel like I know what Nicole Alexander Walker can do. We all know what Trey can do. We all know what Chris Stapps can do. We all know what Okongwu can do, et cetera. But Jalen and Risha are the two I want to see. How are they deploying them in a meaningfully different way than they did last year because there is more creation on this roster. And some will say there's still maybe not enough self creation, maybe not enough of that. I think that's a fair conversation to have for those that feel that way. But Quinn believes in ball movement and creating stress through pace and all that sort of stuff. And Anansi addressed it directly at his media availability. He said, "Hey, in Golden State, we never had a traditional backup point guard, and we were fine." Of course, they're one of the great. They might be the greatest team in the last whatever number of years that they had there. So it's a little easier to deal with. But yeah, for me, it's just how are they? Who starts? Who's playing together? What are they prioritizing? Who are they trying to get reps to get? What groups are they trying to kind of get reps for as a group? In this preseason, and what are they running that looks different? And how? And a lot of that to me is Zach and Jalen, what they're doing with them.
To that end on Jalen, like, does the improved shooting make a difference for his playmaking? Like, is he going to have different alternatives this season? Like it, because it just it. I don't know if the geometry of the floor is going to be different for him. Do you think that makes a difference?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think, and it's specific if he's playing with Kennard. Jalen is a guy. Jalen should be surrounded with as much shooting as possible, as often as possible. And if the second unit is Kennard and Porzingis and Jalen and whoever the other one guys are, that's just going to allow Jalen to have more space to attack because the defense is going to be spread out, counting for the gravity that exists across those lineups. So that's what I'm looking for. And Brad and I have already recorded the Jalen and Trey player cap, so I don't know when he's going to drop them. But those are in the bank. And Brad and I talked a lot about how the spacing is going to really kind of change things for Jalen. But as we saw a lot last year up until the injury, he would defer to a kind of a finesse finish at times when really didn't need to. And there I think there's some decision making and judgment that's kind of needed to kind of just use his vertical dominance and that really fast first step that he has that a lot of people have a hard time containing, and really kind of lean into those special skills that he has to kind of create more through his athleticism. I know he loves to make a good pass, loves to make a smart pass, wants to create a good shot for someone else. He's a selfless guy. But part of the conversation Brad and I had was, I think we started talking about be a little selfish or a lot, and then we changed the word to assertive because we felt that might feel a little better to Jalen to talk about it as assertiveness. But for me, Jalen is the X factor for where this offense ends up on a trajectory. Can he be more aggressive, be more dominant at the rim? Can he do those things that he historically has at times shied away from doing? Is that something that his teammates and his coaches can talk him into embracing that aggressive and assertive style? Because he does that, I think that takes this offense to a completely different level.
Yeah,
Tyler,
Jalen.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to add. There are like a couple of like extended, unedited 5-on-5 runs this summer of Jalen alongside other NBA players. I think it's on Chris Smooth. I think that's his name, his trainer's name. I might be missing out on that. But regardless, if you watch those in its entirety, you see Jalen primarily because this is a half court. This is purely half court. There's no full court going on. He's pretty much playing point guard, and to me, like watching him in that setting against other NBA players, like he looked pretty good doing it. Like where he's getting he's well, his sheer size just demanded double teams, and oftentimes, like the guys he was going up against, they physically could not stop him from getting to the front of the rim, and so they would double, they would trap, and so it was a good environment for him because I think that's what you're going to see a lot of, especially with how this roster is now currently built, where you can't just put your center on Jalen and like get away with it. I think a couple times smarter teams would put a center on Jalen to contest him at the rim, and then just like put like not guard the center more or less, or they put their next biggest guy on the center on particularly Capella, and really not guard him um, during the duration, and so that changed the geometry of the floor. I think this year, particularly with Porzingis, there's just a added element of freedom where he can beat his man off the dribble, and also he can like overpower smaller basketball players. And so the key here is like if he can do that consistently, that kind of just makes everybody's life a whole lot easier. It makes Trey's life easier, Porzingis, just because of the mismatches that he would naturally provide, along with Trey and Porzingis. So that's something to look out for. Is I do think we're going to see more of Jalen handling the ball, even with Trey on the floor. just because the Hawks want to lean more into they want him to take that next step because that's what he's missing is half court self creation. And so, like with this 5-out system, like you said, Glenn, if he's able to beat his man, he is good enough to make the right read off of that. Like to me, I think he's not gonna, dribble into a turnover. He's not gonna force the issue per se. If they're doubling, it's gonna be a quick kick out. And what's great about that is that with this Hawks team that now has plus shooting at every position, that's going to be that's just going to be a win for the Hawks. It's going to be kind of mirror what the Celtics were doing, um, these last couple of years with their 5-out system. So I think I really do think like um, this has a chance for like Jalen to really like. It's weird to say when most improved, but like I do think he's got another level to get to. And so like I think he has an opportunity with this team if he takes that next step. The Hawks could be really special.
Quinn Snyder is only going to tell you what Quinn Snyder wants to tell you. Like he's never going to accidentally bump into revealing some information that he didn't want to tip. And I suspect that we're not going to know the starting lineup for preseason game number 1 until a couple hours before tip off at best. But he did say that he has no qualms about using any two of the three of Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, and Kristaps Porzingis as his two bigs. Any pair of those two works. Is there any chance that in order to get the ball in Jalen's hands more, they bring Jalen off the bench as a sixth man?
No chance.
No chance. That's not happening.
Not even. I don't think they're even thinking about it. Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Jalen. One thing Brad and I talked about: who's the next besides Trey? Who's the next guy likely to make noise to make an all-star? And one thing we talked about was like it wouldn't shock me if Dyson makes it if he makes a big jump, another jump offensively. I mean, that dominant of a defensive player. A lot of times that's not rewarded by the fan vote, but like the coaches will, take that into the court to different consideration, right? But it's really like talking, what does it take for Jalen to get there? Like, what does it take for Jalen to become that guy? So it wouldn't surprise me if he starts as the first to the bench and comes back and does play a lot with the second unit towards the end of the first quarter and beginning of the second quarter. That type of kind of rotation might make some sense to me. But I mean, to me, not starting Jalen Johnson is a fireable offense.
Wow. Okay. I'm an idiot.
Absolutely. Sorry, Kevin. Like I
I mean, it's not like I prefer that, but I mean, there are different ways for guys to get their minutes. Like James Harden came off the bench on some very good teams. And when Oklahoma City did that, I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like you're saving the reps for when he can go against a worse defense. You're distributing the ball because you have so much offensive talent that you want to make sure that both units are equally stacked. Like I don't
Yeah.
know. Like I don't.
I think 1 through 4, it's clear. Assuming Ricochet starts at the three, I assume that. I guess I wouldn't be shocked if Nikhil Alexander. I don't. I mean, that seems surely to be the plan. And they use Nikhil Alexander Walker and Luke Kennard. And Ansi talked about wanting those like their strengths complementing one another's. Like Nah has the defense and Kennard has the offense, and that kind of pairing and works and stuff like that. The big one for me is the center position. But the bottom line is there's 96 minutes a game at the 4 and the 5. And
yeah.
if those guys
Yeah.
play 30 minutes each, that leaves 6 minutes for Moge or whoever.
Yep.
If there's foul trouble, you might need more run from Mo in a game, right? In that kind of setting, and stuff like that. And so I think all three are going to play starters workload,
Sure.
regardless of who
Same.
starts. I think the best quality of this roster is they should be able to play quality lineups all 48 minutes every game. And that's something they couldn't even come close to doing last year. With the injuries, and then the young guys had to kind of step up and play in roles that were much that was over their head for what they should have been reasonably expected to be able to do. And one thing that Ansi and Quinn and the whole organization wants is they seem to value selflessness and team mindedness. And if they ask Onyeka to come off the bench, I think the expectation is, hey, you're still critical part of our rotation. You're still going to play a ton. And but the other part might be is, do they want to manage Kristaps' workload in any way. I have no idea if they're just gonna be like, no, we're gonna play in 30 minutes game. And on the back, we're going to sit them on the back to back, I don't know, 5 to 8 times across the year just to kind of be safe or whatever it might be. But you know, their top 8 players, they're all basically starter level players, all 8 of them, right? Now you get to nine is nine Mo is nine beat. You know, it probably depends on matchup and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, Luke Kennard is a seriously good player, and he's Nickeil Alexander Walker is a serious. I mean, and those guys are going to just do what's asked of them, and I think that expectation applies to everyone. And I think I think that's clear that that's the culture that they want this team to kind of snap to. And so it might feel bad if Onyeka, you know, Onyeka made real progress last year. He made great progress last year. It might feel bad, but I think the expectation is that this is best for the team, so this is what we're gonna do. You know, but it's gonna be
I
interesting to see.
I think it's to me like I don't even know if Quinn was asked about that, or he just came out and said like, yeah, I want to, we want to get Porzingis and Okongwu out there a lot. I just think there's no way for you to sell whoever's not starting that they're playing 24, 23 minutes, backup minutes. Like there's just no way they're going to be able to do that. I just think they're all going to play those two. Whoever starts between Porzingis and Okongwu is not going to matter because they're both going to play 30 minutes a night. Um, I just based on the roster, unless Mo Gay's like out of this world good offensively and like he forces the issue, I don't see how anybody else can overtake Porzingis and Okongwu in that rotation. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I know it's going to be interesting who starts. I don't think it truly matters
Agreed.
that that much. I'll only say it's probably easier to start Porzingis, uh, not just because of his particular skills. Because like some games and some nights, you're going to want to go with a Kongu for a more extended run, and so for it to not feel like I think Okongwu is more of the versatile chess piece for Quinn, and like being able to deploy him off the bench might be more of a tactical move based on. And besides all that, like I just think with when you have Trae Young as your point guard, you probably want elite rim protection next to Trae, and then when Trae's off the floor, you want a more switchable big and really take advantage of the size and length that this roster has up and down the lineup. So I think that might be where Quinn goes, but he could go with the Congo like Jalen Congo lineups have consistently been really good. So it's tough to say where they're going to go until we see them in preseason how they look. But I just think I think to me they want to max a. Trey even talked about how he wants to improve his efficiency this year. I think that's a real emphasis for him. And so I think Trey wants to play alongside an elite offensive player which is what Porzingis is at the center position. So
Yeah.
I just think
Yeah.
I think that might be the tiebreaker as well. That's just something to
Yeah.
monitor.
Yeah. But the other there's a couple other aspects too. If Hawks fans only watch Hawks games, which is totally fine, right? You might not know that a lot of other coaches in recent years will change the starting lineup at some positions based on the opponent. So they don't roll the same 5 out every single game. So that's a thing. And the Hawks have never had the depth to kind of mix and match in that way game to game. So that might be a thing. I think the other
Even if
part
we
for me that I'm
screamed
curious
for it,
about,
even if we were screaming to do that.
yes, I know. And the other part is, do they want Kristaps on this team after this contract year? Right. And then part of it is giving him a good experience, making him feel prioritized, making him feel valued, those sorts of things. Now, Kristaps might say, guys, I don't care. I'm just going to do what the coach asked me to do. I don't know him. I've never met him, never talked to him, anything like that. But giving him a good experience in a contract year is probably another thing to think about, in terms of like making him feel like he wants to come back in that sense, because I mean, having a guy like that who can shoot the ball and give you, rim protection, weed side rim protection, all that sort of stuff is really hard to find. Like like Brooke Lopez is past his prime. Brooke Lopez is half cooked at this point in time, and I love what he did through his peak years and what he turned into and all that sort of stuff. Really respect it. But there's not another guy like his size, high release point, that you're gonna be able to kind of find. So to me, I wonder if like Ansi and Quinn are like, how do we approach this from the standpoint of making Kristaps feel like we want to maximize his talent and value and contribution game to game to game. Is that a thing or is it not a thing? Seems like it might be one of the things to think about.
Even even beyond the start sit stuff with Porzingis, I'm actually more interested in like what is his offensive role going to be? Like how are they going to prioritize him, as like a the primary or secondary option whenever he's on the floor? Um, just due to the fact like he's an elite post talent and like he's so good at drawing fouls as well. And like that is not a skill that any other player that not named Trey Young has on this roster. Nobody else can do this. And so like I wonder with all his plus advantages, like is he going to be? Are they going to like use him as the focal point on offense on against honestly against like certain teams like they're teams that have bad defenders in general? Like do they use him like even more than what the Celtics were doing? Like do they prioritize him similar to what his national team does? Like I'm kind of interested in that because I think like he's like man he's really good like and I just think I honestly I felt sometimes watching him on the Celtics that he was kind of lost in the system a little bit where they didn't utilize him enough. And so I wonder how much the Hawks are going to want to squeeze out of him and see if he can be, you know, a a true focal point for a team that's trying to win a lot of games this
Yeah,
year.
yeah, it's funny. I think Brad and I talked about this at one point. But when Bud was here, like the play he ran for Millsap all the time is called they call it 4 or 4C, right? And basically Millsap gets the ball in the right mid post, and 4 is you got all four guys on the weak side of the other side of the floor running split cuts and screening for each other and trying to create a cutter. 4C means the shooting guard is in the near side corner and only three on the other side. I told Brad they ran that play one time last year across the whole season. I don't know that Quinn still calls it 4. I don't know what he calls it. But it was for Dyson on an ATO. So Dyson had his back to the basket down there, and they were running a split cuts. But it was an ATO. Like Kristaps is made for that play. Kristaps is absolutely his ability to pass over the top of the defense, to see the defense, all that sort of. Kristaps was made for that. So I'm like, are they going to swing some of that usage towards him? And they in the preseason last year, Jalen ran it twice in the preseason, but never ran it once in the regular season. And so that's just it's one of those things I'm going to be looking for is like, okay, are they going to actually lean into some post touches for these guys? And that's a shot pass kind of read, for that player. Every team Kevin Durant's ever played on, he's run a ton of that stuff, just an absolute ton of that stuff. And he prefers the left mid post instead of the right mid post because a right hander for some reason. But that's an example to me of like, okay, we got guys who can do different things this year than what our roster had last year. What does that mean schematically? What does that mean for how we're going to set guys up to use their, the most of their talent and their capabilities? I'm really eager to see that.
And just one last thing about this, like we talked about the Hawks in the playing games. What was missing? A second guy the Hawks would go to for any type of offense outside of Trey Young. If Trey wasn't doing it, it was a garbage shot, no chance, almost an instant turnover every time. And so, like to me, I'm like Porzingis is the most. He's the best offensive talent Trey has ever played with. The only basketball player that comes close is Danilo Gallinari, and Gallinari was very limited, even at that point of his career when the Hawks got him. He is clearly the most talented offensive player Trey's ever played with. What I'm interested in is like how much do they lean on Porzingis' scoring, particularly even with Trey on the floor? Like Trey even talked about how there's an opportunity for him to play even more off ball than what he has been doing in his career. And he's been doing a lot more off ball with Glen. We've talked about that ad nauseum, but I do find it interesting that Trey is both emphasizing that he wants to be way more efficient this year because that's what he's missing. Like if we're talking about in the macro sense of what is Trey Young missing compared to the other top tier talents, MVP caliber players in the game, it's efficiency. It's not that his efficiency is bad. It's just that it's average. The elite, the tier one superstars efficiency are all elite. And so like for Trey to get there, he's got to finish more at the rim and he's got to take easier shots. Do they rely on Porzingis to generate easier shots for him? Similarly, do they rely on Jalen if they can get Porzingis going? Do they rely on Jalen to get Trey easier shots from three? I just think there's some you can see where like there's some symbiotic relationships between those three guys in particular uh, with Trey to really get him to a higher, to elevate his game a bit more so that he can get the recognition that his basketball talents deserve. It's not that to me, offensively, he's one of the greatest in the game today, like flat out.
Yep.
But he doesn't get the credit for that because he's just flat out not as efficient as the other elite players. Even though his passing generates elite offense for his team, that's what he's missing. And it's like, can Porzingis elevate Trey in a way that no other player has been able to elevate Trey before? That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, Brad and I talked a lot about his efficiency on the episode. You can look for that. But I feel like last year a lot of what we saw were defenses inviting him into a seam, like and cutting off the passing lanes. And once he gets in there, he just doesn't have the size to kind of work out of a trap or a defense collapsing after he's in that seam. All that sort of stuff. Going to be harder to do with Chris Stapps, a full and a step and a half behind the 3-point line, and Luke Kennard on the floor. It's going to be harder to do that stuff. And so I do expect there to be an efficiency bump. But when we talk about efficiency, the passing has to be a part of that broader evaluation and how you score him, right? It has to be, right? He creates easy shots for average basketball players, and has been doing that for a long time. But I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see. I thought we've talked about. I thought he showed an absolute ton of leadership last year and just really grew in that area of his person and stuff. But I think he's got clearly more space to work with this season, and I think that's hopefully going to make his life easier instead of driving into three defenders, at the nail or wherever it might be. So he's smaller, so his angles are different, his reads are different. He has to pull up a little earlier than someone who's 6'6", and things like that. But he's still one of the best, floater a guy, that's one of the best floaters in the game, really consistent with that, and such. And last year, I think Brad on the episode we recorded said last year he spent more time off ball than he ever has in his career. Last year was a new high for that. Now I'm not sure where he got that data point, but Brad wouldn't read it if he didn't have it. It might have been cleaning the glass. I don't know. But I mean, there were ATOs where Trey's setting a back screen for someone to get a lob at the rim. That you saw him doing stuff like that last year that he hadn't been doing before.
There was definitely a lot more screening from Trey than,
Yep.
than,
Yep.
than any point in his career. What's it going to look like if teams are switching the actions between Trey and Porzingis? Are they going to be comfortable with what Chris Stapps does at times? Like it's not the most aesthetically pleasing thing because he's not going to like physically overwhelm you to get close to the rim, but yet like he can get to 16 feet and shoot what's a fairly easy shot for him. Like,
Yeah.
are they going to try to, do certain actions behind it? Are they going to try to just get him as much space as possible so that it stays a true post up? Like, what's it going to look like?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. There's several things you can do there. One is if he's straight pick and pop. If you're allowed to just run straight pick and pop, he's going to murder you there if you don't cover it the right way. But what Spo does a lot for his guys, especially Bam, is he'll run cross screens and try to force a switch and get that mismatch. And so if the other team's playing a smaller four or whatever, or you use Trey to screen and try to or Dyson to screen and kind of force the guard onto Porzingis and give him that post touch with the guard on him. There are things you can do. You can also use a ram screen where there's a down screen uh basically under the rim and pop him up to the nail and hopefully force a switch there. So there's a lot of different kind of screening actions you can run to force a mismatch. And it'll be interesting to see if Quinn leans into more of that this season with to create those touches 10, 12 feet from the rim where he has an advantage in the mismatch. So there's a lot like I understand I'm not an NBA coach, not even close, but I'm really eager to see, what Quinn rolls out there that looks different and new. That's just gonna be because this is a completely differently skilled team on the offensive side of the court, completely different.
Um, yeah, like to me, like it'll be interesting to see how often teams even attempt to switch with Porzingis, just because he's such a lethal switch buster and Trey's such a lethal passer. Like I don't know if teams want those problems. So it would be like it. But when you said that, I remember that oftentimes teams don't defend Trey with point guard. They defend him with
Right. Oh, for sure.
wing, right?
Mhm.
So that's where it's like, okay, maybe even less than that. How often is, because oftentimes Dyson's going to be the basketball player who's being guarded by the smallest player on the team.
For sure.
How comfortable are the Hawks with Dyson running some action to get that smaller player onto Porzingis? Like I think that might be even more instructive because Trey's not like Trey's going to make the right decision regardless of what's happening. Trap, double screen, alley. It doesn't. It really doesn't matter. Like Trey's an offensive maestro, but Dyson's I think is going to be the more interesting one. Reese Chase was just a little too. He's just too tall to play smaller players on him at this point. So it's going to be Dyson. So it's going to be important that Dyson really takes advantage of these mismatches and like force team. Like it'll be interesting if the Hawks will win, let Dyson cook more or less and force teams to play him fairly so that you get that matchup with Trey on the smaller player. Because when Trey's guarded against life side players, he's like a different human being. It's like now he doesn't have to worry about his shot being contested. That means his catch and shoot threes are a lot easier. He's able to get by him, he's not worried about a backside contest blocking his shot from behind. It opens up a lot of Trey's offensive game. So like really Dyson and also Nikhil. Nikhil's going to be in the game as well, and Luke Kennard. I actually wanted to bring this up because I do think Trey and Luke Kennard are going to play more than what people think. Um, so it'll be interesting to see what the defensive lineups are with those two on the floor because they're going to need a lot of coverage and they're going to have to figure like I'm interested to see like how do they try to mitigate that on the defensive side of the floor because I do think they got to be able to squeeze those two on the floor at the same time. They got to be able to get they're too dynamic offensively. Like it's too potent of an offensive weapon to not try to utilize, especially during the regular season at least. So it'll
And just
that's
minutes
maybe
wise, like the math, I mean, they have to, like, right? Like you've got this rotation that is 8 players deep, like a solid 8 players. Like you can't get away with avoiding twosomes within that 8 if you really want to maximize what you have there. Like the math just doesn't work. Like you can't have them playing less than 24 minutes a game. There are going to be times when they have to play together.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And Luke is going to play a lot because
Yeah.
they paid him 11 million. Like
Eight's better, the top 8
1 year.
is distinctly better than what comes at 9 and 10. So you just got to play them.
yeah. And the other part too is that like we know like game flow matters, right? When they're playing from behind, they're gonna in the second half they're gonna have a lot of Luke plus Trey trying to ramp up the offense and the shooting and all that sort of stuff. So game flow will dictate that a good degree as well. But Kristaps, the rim protection helps mitigate some of that. It's the drivers, push them in, funnel them, as they say, into the rim protector. And, healthy Jalen makes is a big part of that too, as well. And looking forward to seeing what kind of growth Risha shows. But I agree, like, especially when they're playing from behind, NBA coaches spam 3-point shooting when they're trying to catch up. They just do.
Do you think along those lines that there will be times when they maybe lean into Nikhil Alexander Walker instead of Dyson when you're trying to sort of you're down 10, 12 points? Like, is that something that you might lean into a little bit?
I will say this. I think it'll be Ricochet first, unless Ricochet proves that he's good enough to for it to be like, okay, it's Dyson coming off.
That's fair.
So that's going to be one of those things where it's like the pecking order is Nikhil over Ricochet. I could
Yeah.
totally see even beginning of the season, Nikhil finishing games over Ricochet for the vast majority until
Yeah.
or unless Ricochet proves that he's a better basketball player. And he's got the uphill battle of being the younger player and the less experienced basketball player compared to Nikhil, who they went out and signed. So I think Nikhil's going to be like I think Nikhil and Dyson are going to be the two guys who are going to be on the floor. It's going to be will Ricochet fight who would Ricochet's minutes take? Will it be Nikhil or Dyson? That's probably an interesting conversation. But that's something we're not going to know for like 30 games. To me, I'm not. I'm just not going to know with how Ricochet looks this season.
Yeah, I'll be quick, but Nikhil said, I have to be a three-level scorer. It's a different offense. Different things are gonna be asked of him. He's a great catch and shoot guy, but he knows he's got to attack on the catch, make the decision, and that's stuff they didn't really do in Minnesota. And so Nikhil already said, I know I got to do different stuff, and so it's gonna be fun to see how leans into that.
All right. Fun times ahead. I appreciate y'all for joining me and good night, Bob.
Good night, Bob.
Night, Bob.